Stephen or Ross, would you want to?
Yeah, well, I suppose a bit like Phil, my position in this is pretty well known, but I suppose just to give my opposition to fracking in some context, I think the point's been made that it does need to be a political judgment. We do need to be informed by the science, but we as politicians have to make a call on this. Most of the evidence we have, and I take Sandy's point about the US, maybe there's been bad practice, but that's where most of our evidence comes from, and we do have to look at evidence, and we have to look at the level of risk. Richard Merman himself says there's a risk of failure of about 1 in 1,000. Professor Ingrafia from Cornell University puts that at 1 in 150. If we look at the fact we've 1,400 wells in Northern Ireland proposed, 9,000 across Ireland, whichever of those figures you take, there's going to be some level of well failure in Ireland if we go ahead with fracking. So we have to decide, is that level of risk acceptable? I mean, again, in terms of the evidence, it's very hard. We had Tamboran actually in this room as a joint, with the EDI committee, and every time you pointed to shale gas failures, fracking failures, Tamboran said this wasn't us. And the problem being Tamboran have never fracked anywhere in the world. In fact, they told us they wanted Northern Ireland and Ireland to be their shop window for the rest of the world. So do we want to be Tamboran's guinea pigs? Do we want to be the area from which they try to launch a new company? I'll wrap up. Just finally, then a question to Sandy, because it was a question to Sandy. You've said that the American example is an example of bad practice and we've better regulation here. But Northern Ireland Water are our single biggest polluter, and they're a government-owned organisation, and we can't regulate them. How do we propose to regulate a fracking company, the damage of which, if they do damage, will be irreparable, and the fines we've shown to date are not often a deterrent to pollution?
If there were ever a political issue, that's it. If you can't regulate your own government department. But I think it has to go into your risks then, but you need to get your house in order.
Okay. Anybody? Gary?
Just to follow on the regulation point, I mean, and I speak with the supposed degree of experience, having spent half of my life in regulation and enforcement. Regulation is only a tool. It only ever can be. And to rely upon that as your fail-safe, Dave, it just won't work. It's an interesting article from The Guardian, and it's very relevant to today. Codrilla, which are the company in Lancashire currently drilling test holes, have breached their planning conditions on something quite straightforward, but you know, the number of hours that they'll drill and the noise levels that they'll raise. And the point really is, you know, scant regard to the planning conditions that were put in place. So it's an example. I know it's you know, there's plenty of examples where regulation, where the companies take calculated risks. That's the reality.
But it's a matter of political will, because if you have regulations, you have monitoring, and you have to have enforcement. And if they breach their conditions, you shut them down.
Well, part of the problem here is that in Northern Ireland we don't even have an independent environmental protection agency. No. I mean, our fear is that regulation, a bit like the Irish football team, great on paper, crap on grass.
I'm resisting the temptation to laugh at that. Over here, Terry. There's a microphone just coming along.
Right, thanks. I was in charge of the development of energy courses at Belfast Metropolitan College for 30 years. So I think I know a little bit about what I'm going to say. And I would just simply say it's okay for Dr. Barry and Mr. Agnew to give their opinions. I'm interested in facts, such as the report from the UK Department of Energy and Climate Change says that hydraulic fracking to reach gas trapped in shale rocks could safely resume in the UK. Durham University in the UK, together with Cardiff University, University of Tromsø, I'll be as quick as I can, in Norway, have produced a report which said the likelihood of contamination of drinking water in aquifers due to fractures when there is a separation of more than a kilometre is negligible. Richard Davies a director of Durham's Energy Institute said that as long as the Durham University, as long as the depth is in excess of 0.6 kilometres, there is little risk. Tremors would be no greater than a bus passing houses. No, and that has actually happened with mining and has caused no problems whatever. Professor Robert Mayer, Chair of the Royal Society, Royal Academy of Engineering Joint Committee, have fully recommended that in all parts of the UK we go ahead with this. He says the risks associated with fracking can be managed effectively in the UK, provided there are operational best practices and effective regulation, which I would support. Shale gas development gives low electricity, low gas prices, greatly reducing carbon emissions. Carbon emissions in the United States will be back down to 1990 levels very soon. The price of natural gas has fallen to $2 as of April 2012, the lowest in a decade. For those who worry about carbon emissions, I've already told you that that is the way to get carbon emissions down.
Can we just throw you to a wee close? I'm happy to bring you back in a wee moment.
And also about chemicals. I wanted to make, there's no problem about chemicals. They're used in domestic appliances with no problem whatever. So that's a scare, another scare. These are all scares.
The point's made. I just want to bring people around. I'm going to take. Hold on, I'm going to take 2 or 3. But John did say first of all.
Just a very quick response. I mean, it's partly in relation to Terry's, but also some of the other things I've been saying. The sad reality, the reason why America's CO2 emissions have gone down is not just due to the dash to gas, it's because the economy has collapsed. That's a larger proportion of the reasons why the CO2 are down. And just to return in terms of answering, it's not simply the opinions that somehow are dismissed in the contradistinction to facts, Terry. What I'm arguing, I made explicit in my presentation, is that I think we're dealing with post-normal science in which facts and values are irreducibly connected to each other, and we should follow the model of the IPCC. That's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So you can't simply say, oh, we're facts and your values, or you're opinionated and you have emotions or something that can't be taken into account. We need both of them together.
Okay. I can name 50,000 graduate physicists and climate scientists who do not agree that even fossil fuels are in any way...
Now, hold on a minute.
When you point your finger, there are 3 pointing back at you.
Terry, please. I'm going to take control of this. Gentleman over here. John, yes.
Hello. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. Where to start? I remember reading in the Irish Times a year and a bit ago, the projected value of the field was 120 billion, and I think I recall that the value in Northern Ireland was 70 billion worth of gas. Now, a short read, second paragraph down, turns out that, however, we only get 12 billion. And then we only get, because the operational costs of extracting this are so high, that they're at the level for that 12 billion, they're at the level of 6 billion of expenditure in diesel and concrete and whatever. My point is, there's an extremely poor return, extremely poor energy return on investment. This is not a viable situation, and in any case, you're only putting off, as Professor Stiles commented, do we want the gas now? Well, or do we not want to not have it in 20 years' time or whenever it runs out? Because that's the maximum time scale that we will have for this gas.
Can I take that? We've got that point. You can come back. I want to come over. There was somebody over on this side. The microphone's just here, behind you. And over to the other side.
Thank you, Chair. Boyd Black, Labour Party. My question is, I think one of the presentations said there was 50 years' worth of gas in Fermanagh. But if 50 years' worth of gas to match Northern Ireland's needs, but if it's exported, how many years have we got? 5 years? If it's all going abroad?
You can't actually answer that because it depends on what you export.
I know, but if presumably it'll go onto the world market and it could all be away in 5 years. And I'm not saying against it, but the other thing is, how do we capture some of that? Do we need a sovereign wealth fund, as the Norwegians has, for their gas?
Excellent point brought up by Sandy. Can come back. I'm trying to lift it up a wee bit. There's a lady over here. Then to Ross. Lady first of all, and to the two of you anyway.
Yeah, I just want to be specific about Fermanagh because it's the first inland in the fracking zone, and one of the things about Fermanagh is very special. The difference between the separation between the aquifer and the frack zone is approximately 500 metres, and the University of Tromsø study has said that fracking, the absolute minimum guideline for fracking should be 600 metres. So, in my opinion, fracking is out in Fermanagh and it will never work there.
Anybody want to take that on board? I thought it was 1.5.
I didn't hear what you said, actually, what the distance was.
The Tromsø study, which is actually...
500 metres is too shallow.
Yes, in Fermanagh, the separation of the aquifer to the fracking zone is 500 metres.
It's the separation of the aquifer, though. That's not...
Are you I'm sorry, but are you really talking about aquifers? Or are you talking about...
Yes, actually, I do have a diagram here, and it's a Tambourine diagram, and it shows the separation.
Okay, if it's 500 metres, it's too shallow, but you need to be clear about what an aquifer is. An aquifer is not porous rock containing water.
No,
it's
this is
rock
a drinking water
water.
aquifer. This is a locally important aquifer.
Well,
Well,
can
that's
I just say the issue, I mean, there is a bit of support here in the science, but what there's not quite clear yet is the facts on it. What Peter said is if it's that shallow, it's too shallow, but we need to have a wee chat and we'll see, and we can tie up on that.
I would be afraid that we forget about Fermanagh because it is in the front line here and it should come first, in my
Let me
opinion.
tell you, if you knew who I lived with, you'd know I could never forget about Fermanagh.